Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Linda Moscatelli from the Title I Monitoring and Support Office at the California Department of Education, and I'm joined by my colleague, Christina French from the School Improvement and Support Office to discuss how both of our offices work together to support LEAs that have schools identified for school support and improvement, including Comprehensive Support and Improvement, or CSI, and Additional Targeted Support and Improvement, or ATSI, as they're going through the FPM process. During this presentation, LEAs will gain an understanding of how CSI and ATSI are monitored by both offices, what the requirements of the School Support and Improvement, or SSI instrument are, and what are the roles and responsibilities of the Title I Monitoring and Support Office, or TIMSO, and the School Improvement and Support Office, or SISO, as they relate to CSI and ATSI. Although we will not be taking questions during this presentation, you're invited to bring your questions to the upcoming virtual School Support and Improvement FPM question and answer session. There, you'll have a chance to speak with us and ask any related questions. Details on how to join the question and answer session will be given at the end of this presentation. My office, TIMSO, and Christina's office, SISO, are two separate offices at CDE, but our offices work together to provide LEAs technical assistance and monitoring related to CSI and ATSI. I will begin by giving an overview of TIMSO's work as it relates to CSI and ATSI, including a review of each item in the SSI instrument. I'll then turn it over to Christina to discuss SISO's work. TIMSO is the office responsible for conducting federal program monitoring, or FPM reviews, for Title I funded programs, such as compensatory education and SSI. For LEAs participating in the FPM process in 2020-2021, your review will include a separate monitoring instrument in addition to the compensatory education, or CE instrument, if your LEA has schools that were identified for school support and improvement. This instrument is the School Support and Improvement, or SSI instrument. We will review each of the items contained in the instrument during this presentation. If you've already attended the presentation on the CE instrument, you may notice that some items in the CE instrument also appear in the SSI instrument. Please note that evidence provided for items in the CE instrument will be applicable to Title I Part A funds, while the evidence provided for items in the SSI instrument will be applicable to CSI funds. The requirement for SSI 01, school site activities, is that the LEA shall, for each school identified by the state and in partnership with stakeholders, including principals and other school leaders, teachers, parents, and family members, locally develop and implement a CSI or Additional Targeted Support and Improvement, ATSI plan for the school to improve student outcomes. For CSI, this plan must be informed by all indicators, including student performance against state-determined long-term goals, and must include evidence-based interventions. The CSI plan must also be based on a school-level needs assessment and identify resource inequities. In addition, the CSI plan must be approved by the school, the LEA, and the state educational agency. ATSI plan requirements are similar to those of CSI. These plans must be informed by all indicators, including student performance against long-term goals, must include evidence-based interventions, must be approved by the LEA prior to implementation, must be monitored by the LEA, and must identify resource inequities. The evidence that LEAs will be asked to provide for SSI 01 includes any LEA notifications to schools that have been identified for ATSI, the school's improvement plan, and any records of stakeholder involvement in developing the plan. For many schools, the improvement plan will be included in the SIPSA, but in some cases, this plan may be part of another document, such as a single site district or a charter that used its LCAP in place of its SIPSA. Records of stakeholder involvement may include agendas, meeting minutes, and/or sign-in sheets that indicate stakeholders were involved in developing the plan. The requirement for SSI 02, Allocations and Reporting, is that the LEA must disperse CSI funds in accordance with the approved CSI funding plan that has been entered into the Grant Management and Reporting Tool, or GMART. For this item, LEAs will upload the general ledger for CSI expenditures under Resource Code 3182. This ledger should indicate that expenditures of CSI funds match the plan for funding that the LEA entered in GMART. The requirements for SSI 03, Allowable Use of Funds, include that the LEA ensures that costs charged to the CSI program are reasonable, necessary, and allocable to the program, that the LEA uses CSI funds for the development of strategies to improve pupil performance at schools identified as requiring support, and that these strategies are aligned to the LEA's LCAP, and that CSI funds are not used to hire additional permanent staff. Evidence that will be reviewed for SSI 03 includes duty statements for staff funded in whole or in part with CSI funds, the general ledger for CSI expenditures under Resource Code 3182, the position control report for staff funded in whole or in part with CSI funds, the school's improvement plan, and time and effort records for staff funded with CSI funds. Please note, although permanent staff may not be funded with CSI funds, the LEA may have expended CSI funds for temporary staff or for extra staff time beyond their usual workday, and documentation must be kept to account for this, including time and effort records. The requirement for SSI 04, Supplement Not Supplant with School Improvement Funds, is that each school the LEA proposes to serve receives all of the state and local funds it would have received in the absence of CSI funds. This means that any of the LEA's schools that receive CSI funds should receive those funds in addition to all of the state and local funds that would have been received by the school if it had not been identified for CSI. Evidence to demonstrate compliance with SSI 04 is a written methodology for allocating state and local funds for the fiscal year under review. This methodology may take multiple forms and may be a written narrative describing how funds are allocated, or a spreadsheet showing equitable amounts allocated to each school, or a combination of the two. Regardless of the format, the methodology should demonstrate that CSI funds supplement the school's state and local funding. The requirement for SSI 05, LEA Administrative Charges, Time and Effort, is that the LEA must properly charge and document allowable salaries and wages that are reasonable and necessary in accordance with applicable CSI program requirements and federal accounting requirements. Evidence requests for SSI 05 include duty statements for staff funded in whole or in part with CSI funds, the position control report for such staff, the LEA's time and effort policies and procedures, and time and effort records for staff funded in whole or in part with CSI funds. If CSI funds have not been utilized for any personnel costs, please note this in a comment in the California Department of Education Monitoring Tool, or CMT. The requirement for SSI 06, LEA Equipment Inventory, is that an LEA spending CSI funds on equipment shall maintain a historical inventory record for each piece of equipment with an acquisition cost of $500 or more per unit. This record must include the following for each such item: the item type or description, the model or name of the item, the serial or identification number, the funding source and federal award identification number, who holds title to the item, the acquisition date, the item's original cost, the percentage of federal participation in costs for each award under which the item was acquired, the location of the item, the use and current condition of the item, transfer, replacement, or disposition of obsolete or unusable equipment, and any ultimate disposition data, including the date of disposal and sale price or method used to determine the item's current fair market value. Disposition of equipment purchased with CSI funds with a fair market value in excess of $5,000 may be retained, sold, or disposed of with written approval of the federal awarding agency or pass-through entity. Disposition of equipment with a current fair market value of $5,000 or less may be retained, sold, or otherwise disposed of with no further obligation. The LEA must conduct a physical inventory of each item of equipment, and the results must be reconciled with the property records at least once every 2 years. The evidence that LEAs will be asked to provide for SSI 06 includes approvals of any capital expenditures, as well as historical inventory records that include all of the required information. If no equipment has been purchased with CSI funds, please note this in a comment in CMT. Now that we've had an opportunity to review each of the items in the SSI instrument, you may have more questions about specific evidence requests or requirements. You may bring these questions to the upcoming question and answer session. Of course, at any time, you may also contact your SSI reviewer with questions about the instrument as well. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Christina French to talk about the School Improvement and Support Office.
Hi everyone, this is Christina French. As many of you know, the School Improvement and Support Office administers several grants, with one of the primary grants being the Every Student Succeeds Act Comprehensive Support and Improvement Local Educational Agency Grant, or the SSCSI LEA grant for short. With the intent of these funds being used to support the development of the CSI plan and its implementation to improve student outcomes in schools identified for CSI. Keeping in mind that only LEAs with schools eligible for CSI can apply for the SSCSI LEA grant. And once the LEA has received approval of their application for funding, our office at predetermined intervals apportions the grant funding, monitors expenditures through the online grant management and reporting tool, and provides ongoing technical assistance to LEAs. I will now turn the presentation back over to my colleague, Linda, to wrap up.
Please bring any questions or concerns related to school improvement, programs, and/or monitoring to a virtual question and answer session. This session will take place on July 30th from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. and may be accessed via the Zoom login provided in the FPM training schedule. You may also send any questions in advance of the session to timso@cde.ca.gov. Of course, at any time, you may contact either of our offices with your questions, and we would be happy to assist you. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to working with you and wish you a wonderful day.